Cab driver Peter went to work very early today because last night the collectors came to him again and demanded to repay the overdue loan. Guys, I was unfairly fired. I need time to earn the right amount of money. I'm working 20 hours a day. I will pay it all back soon, he kept saying. We're giving you 3 days grace period. If you don't pay, we will come back. And then we will have a tough talk, said the tough guys. Peter didn't believe their words because the conversation had already taken place before. They used to give 3 days grace period too, but as soon as 2 days passed, they bothered Peter again with calls and visits to his rented apartment. We're not going to talk about how we got into big debt and where he spent the money. Peter was a decent man. From the moment the bank turned his loan agreement over to the collection company, he never once gave up. He had done everything he could to pay it off. Today he expected to work all 20 hours, buy himself 2 sandwiches, 2 coffees, set aside some money for cigarettes, and he intended to put the rest of the money away. If he could work like that for 7 months, more than half of his debt would be paid off. While he was mentally counting the money he had not yet earned, his gaze fell on an elderly woman. She was strangely dressed. Baggy grey-colored clothes with large holes on the bottom, a large bag on her shoulder that resembled one carried by homeless people, and her hair was disheveled. While he was looking at her, she walked straight towards him, then tapped lightly on the car window. Without waiting for Peter to turn on his matter and open the window, the woman jumped into the back seat of the car and said in a commanding tone, "Let's go. I need to go to the Four Seasons Hotel. There is going to be a party our way." Immediately, Peter couldn't smell the odor of alcohol coming from the woman. He had recently had an incident where a tipsy woman had refused to pay and offered something obscene as a favor. For some reason, Peter thought that this old woman might also be one of those. He had a reason. "Why don't you ask how much it will be? I have to calculate it for a year before ahead, so you won't complain later," he said. "Young man, how about this? You are sorry to please a woman, and women like me. I will be pleased if you give me a ride at the discount or even for free." The woman was flirtatious. Peter had no doubt that this was the kind of customer who wanted everything for free. He instantly became angry. "You should leave the car. That's not how I work. I need the money," Peter said. "And I don't have any, but we can drive to the hotel. My friend Ryan will meet me there, and he will pay you," she said. But Peter got angry. "No, if you don't have any money, you don't get in a cab. I don't pick up beggars," he said, and then he saw a respectable man on the sidewalk looking for a car. Peter leaned out of the car and asked him if he wanted a cup. The man nodded approvingly. Peter realized he was doing the right thing. At this time, an elderly woman was saying something, but he didn't want to waste his time on her and asked for the exit. The woman got out of the car, and before she did, she wished Peter a good day and apologized for bothering him. Peter ignored her polite gesture. As soon as the respectable man gave the address, he rushed there. His workday has been a busy one. Fortunately, he managed to earn a little more than he expected. To celebrate his small success, in the evening he bought himself a chocolate bar for his coffee, enjoying the dessert in the parking lot. It was getting close to bedtime, and yes, his car has been serving as his lodging for a few days now. He opened the back door of the car to fold down the seat as a sleeping place, and that's when he discovered a strange find. A rich bag of coarse grey cloth. Peter thought about throwing it away, but at the last minute, the idea came to him to look for the owner and maybe get a reward from him for the find. What if there was something important in there? And in the bag was a cellophane roll, an old photo album, and a worn book. Peter had never been interested in books, so he didn't even open it. And in the cellophane bundle were some documents. There was also an old World Business card, Dr. Sandy Meyer. And then Peter realized how badly he had behaved this morning. That name had once been a household name to him. And the story goes like this. Peter was 8 years old when the accident happened to him. He was playing soccer with some kids in the yard. And when the ball rolled into the yard of the neighboring house, he decided to get it. He deftly jumped over the metal fence and headed for the ball, which was lying not far from a dog box. This dog belonged to Mr. Brooks. His name was Dixie, and she was the favorite of the whole neighborhood. Dixie was always kind to little children. That's why she didn't make a sound when she saw the boy. But Peter, instead of taking the ball in his hand and passing it to his friends over the fence, decided to kick it in the hope that it will fly over the fence by itself. But he missed. Seconds later, there was a thud-up yelp from Dixie the dog. Only now did Peter realize that the ball had gone into the dog's box and stayed there. He felt most sorry for Dixie. Peter rushed into the box to retrieve the ball, to pet Dixie, and to beg his forgiveness. He climbed into the box without fear, but in doing so, he made Dixie angry. Peter didn't know that Dixie had puppies. The flying ball hit the puppies sucking peacefully on their mother's milk, and there was a terrifying howl from the cute puppies in the box. And when Dixie saw the human cub that had to unceremoniously barge into his box, it was the first time her anger boiled over. In the yard of Mr. Brooks' house, there were screams. While the landlord rushed to the rescue, Peter had barely made it outside. When Mr. Brooks saw him, his eyes widened. "Oh my gosh, baby, what's the matter with you?" was the last thing Peter heard before the blood rushed from his face. The very next instant, the boy lost consciousness from the intense pain. He felt how instantly all the noise of the surrounding world disappeared. All the surrounding space slowly floated before his eyes, as if he was immersed in water, the current of which carried him somewhere far away. The current of water led him to some island. There were many strangers there. He also saw his grandmother, who had recently fallen ill and passed away. Seeing Peter, for some reason his grandmother was not happy but upset. Peter ran towards her, but she wouldn't let him get closer to her. "Go away! Go back!" she shouted. "Grandma, I missed you so much," Peter kept repeating. "Peter, go away, I tell you. It's not time for you to come here yet. Go back!" she shouted and ran away from him. The island was incredibly beautiful. Peter liked it immediately. He didn't want to go back, but his grandmother's unfriendliness hurt him. A long time passed while Peter walked around the beautiful island. But one day a strong wind came up. The friendly islanders suddenly disappeared and Peter was left alone. At some point, he felt like he was losing the ground under his feet and falling into some deep and cold pit. He was flying down into abyss. Suddenly he was in unbearable pain. Not only his whole body, but also his soul. He wanted very much to stay on the island, but at some point, he collapsed on the hard and cold surface. He lay there for quite some time until he heard a familiar voice. "Peter, honey, we love you so much," whispered his mother. Peter opened his eyes with difficulty and felt as if a piece of concentrate was on his face. He wanted to say something, but his mother gently put her index finger on his lips and said, "Peter, you can't talk yet. Mr. Myatt had performed a very serious operation. Now we have to wait for the stitches to heal," she said. It took Peter a long time to recover. During that time, Mr. Myatt became like a second mother to him. Every morning, she would look into his room and say, "Peter, you look wonderful today. It's just a little longer and you can go back to playing soccer with your friends." At such moments, Peter wanted to answer the doctor with a kind word, but he could not speak, because the stitches on his face were just healing. A whole month went by like that. When Peter finally felt better, he went for a walk. On his way back from the walk, he happened to see his reflection in the mirror in the foyer of the clinic and was horrified. There were many stitches on his face. He didn't like himself like that. Then he cried bitter tears. The tears ran down his face, and the bitter drops stood in the stitches on his face. He was again in unbearable pain, both physically and mentally. Dr. Meyer, who was passing by, caught him in a state. "Peter, you've seen yourself after the operation. Do you look disfigured to yourself?" she asked. Peter nodded his head and cried further. Then Dr. Meyer took him by the hand and led him into her office. There she talked at length about how and what they will do with his face next. "It takes time, Peter. It's only a few months. I've already devised a plan to restore your face. It will be the same. You just have to trust me and worry less. Is that what you promised me?" she asked. Peter knew that Dr. Meyer should be trusted. He promised that he wouldn't cry about his appearance anymore. After being discharged from the hospital, there was a long period of rehabilitation, with Peter's parents taking the boy to the doctor regularly and her doing something to his face each time. Eventually, after 6 months, articles began to appear in the newspapers and magazines that Dr. Meyer had performed a miracle. It wasn't until many years later, when Peter was a grown man, that he realized that the doctor had done the impossible in her day. That day, his dog Dixie bit off his nose and part of his face. They threatened him with lifelong disability and, of course, external disfigurement. But Dr. Meyer did not hesitate then. She decided on the most difficult operation, which lasted almost 15 hours. She took skin from other parts of the boy's body and sewed it on his face. The doctor told reporters that her colleagues had mixed reactions to her decision. Some of them condemned her for taking too risky a step, but the doctor explained that without this operation, the boy's psyche could break down. In the end, everything turned out fine. When Peter turned 18 years old, there was a family disaster. Their house burned down, but his father was able to find a way out of the situation. He got a good job in a neighboring city. The family moved without a second thought. Dr. Meyer remained in the past. Then Peter became a student, had no problem getting acquainted with girls and building relationship. No one had any idea what he had gone through as a child. Peter remembered it all and he felt incredibly ashamed now. How could he not recognize Dr. Meyer? It was true that the years had taken their toll. She was no longer the young woman with the amazingly beautiful mop of hair and smiling eyes. Peter realized that he had to find the doctor, return her back, and beg her forgiveness. He had no trouble finding the doctor's address. It was on the paperwork. Only he worried, will the doctor forgive him now after his rudeness? When someone knocked on the door, Meyer was glad. She had recently finished her morning cycle of the recreational exercises, which had lasted almost 2 hours. Afterward, she stretched the whole body out of the mat and relaxed, and she was supposed to offer everybody practice. She opened the door and saw the unfamiliar man on the doorstep. "Dr. Meyer, please, forgive me. I was very rude to you yesterday. I'm going through a rough path right now, and I didn't hold back. I'm very ashamed," he said. "And who are you, excuse me? Have we met somewhere?" The woman was surprised. "You got into my cab yesterday and left your documents there. Here, I brought them to you," he said and handed her the bag. "Thank you very much. I thought I'd have to go through the police to find her," she smiled. "You will forgive me, please. I shouldn't have behaved like that to you. I remember how much you did for me in my childhood. I'm ashamed of myself," Peter repeated. "Young man, you are confused. I've never seen you before. If that's all, I think I'll go back to the house. Have a good day," she said and closed the door in his face. Peter was saddened that she didn't recognize him. Or maybe it's for the best. He thought on the way he was in a hurry to get to work again. Worked all day and felt drained in the morning. Now every night before going to sleep he remembered his childhood and that unfortunate event. He read medical literature. It all boiled down to the fact that if not for Dr. Meyer's determination, Peter's life could have been very different. He would have felt ugly, perhaps because of his missing nose. He would have had a severe speech impediment. There would have been breathing problems. He will have cough colds often and been sick for long periods of time. He will not be able to be friends with the boys as before, and he could not even dream of girls. In short, the doctor then gave him back a full life. Peter could not accept the fact that he did not get her forgiveness for her rudeness. After thinking briefly, Peter decided to go to her house again. He worked late at night. In the evening, he took out a small sum to buy a bouquet of flowers, had a modest dinner, and went to Meyer's house. On the way, he had a misfortune. His car stalled, and only there he remembered that the breakdown is serious, and he should have shown the car to the master long ago. He found himself in a desperate situation in an unfamiliar city, on a dark street on a rainy night. When the two men came out of the alley, Peter was glad to have someone to ask for help. "Guys, where's the nearest auto repair shop around here? I'm having a little trouble," he said to the strangers. The guys didn't say anything in response. One of them came up to him and took him by the throat. The other put a knife into him and said, "Give me your money, your bank cards, your watch, whatever else you have, or you will get into being in big trouble now." Peter realized that it was useless to talk to those tough guys. He deftly bent down and escaped from the hands of the second bandit. After a moment, though, he started to run, shouting help, but one of the bandits quickly caught up with him. When the other one came at him with a knife, Peter covered his face with his hand, and the knife cut his hand. At that moment, he screamed for help even louder. Along the dark street, lights came on the two houses. One was 3 stories high and large. A man leaned out of his window. Immediately he realized what was going on and shouted to his guard, "John, there seems to be some guy stopping making noise outside. Check the gate again and secure all the locks, in case they want to rob my house," he said. And the house across the street was small. The lights were on it in the window too. Hearing the noise outside, the owner of the house shouted, "What are you doing, you bastards? I'm calling the police." "Mister, and you hold on, I'm already calling the doctors and running to your aid," he said, and after a minute, he ran out of his gate. Seeing the stranger, who was running toward them with the bat in his hands, the bandits ran away. Peter sat on the ground and held his arm. "Are you badly hurt? Let's go to my house. My wife is a nurse. She will bandage your arm," he suggested. Peter noticed, however, that the stranger had left his suite open, and through him he could see that the door to the house was also left open. He was surprised and asked, "Why didn't you close up tighter when there are bandits outside?" he asked. "Mister, don't think about anything. Right now your health is more important than anything else," the man said, and then helped Peter up from his seat. The wound was not deep. The stranger brought him to his house. His wife Sarah turned out to be a kind woman. She immediately understood the situation and immediately began to dress the wound. "That's better. Take care of your arm for a couple weeks and it will heal," she said. "Thank you so much. You've been a great help. Tell me, how much do I owe you?" Peter asked. "Not a thing. Anyone can be in an unfortunate situation. Don't think you owe us anything," Sarah said. And then her husband helped Peter to his car. He also told him where the nearest repair shop was and shook his hand goodbye. Peter was impressed by the kindness and helplessness of the simple family, but his ears kept ringing with the words of the first neighbor when he ordered John to close the gate tighter. He had thought about it for many days, but he was back on the street again. This time, he was determined Dr. Meyer opened the door for him again. This time she smiled at him and said, "Come inside, Peter. How's your arm? I heard you got into trouble on your street. Was worried about you." she said. Thanks, I'm fine. But that's not what I'm talking about right now. I've come to apologize for my rudeness. I can't forgive myself for my behavior, he said. You should forgive yourself, because you've already learned the lesson you need to learn. That night, I heard the cries for help and looked out the window too, but I kept the light off so as not to attract attention. I witnessed the whole thing. And you yourself, what did you learn from the situation? She asked me. I understood that the first neighbor was worried about himself, and the second for me. It was amazing, he said. You understood everything right. Wealth makes a man better in his own eyes, but it does not make him more human. And God and the world need human beings to keep the world from falling apart. I'm glad you learned the right lesson, she said. Have you forgiven me for being rude? He asked again. I didn't take offense because I recognized you right away, but I didn't want to admit it so as not to embarrass you. And then when you came, I didn't want you to have negative feelings either. You learned your lesson, so don't worry about it and go, she said. Peter sat with her for a long time. They had a long chat about everything. After a while, he noticed that the question of money began to worry him less and less. Now he thought more about showing more humanity. This he learned quickly. By then, his financial debts had melted away like snow, and he never had such a sad experience.